This is just a very weird story. Hello guys, I'm Jessie, I remember this time, and today I'm going to talk about the curious case of Benjamin Button. Not that one. Yes, that one. The first line of the curious case of Benjamin Button is, as long ago as 1860, it was the proper thing to be born at home. So we know that a child will be born, probably. He introduces us to the Roger Buttons. Mostly to Mr. Roger Buttons, because Mrs. Roger Buttons mainly just gives birth and we don't know much about her afterwards. Even though she lives, I mean, he could at least have killed her. Anyway, they were a very rich couple, they were very high in their social standing, and they're having a child. However, he says that they're all ahead of style and Mrs. Button is not having her firstborn at home. She's at a hospital and Mr. Button is going to the hospital as the story begins. As he arrives at the hospital, the family doctor is leaving, and as a father on the day of his child's birth, he does not expect the reaction that he gets from this doctor and from pretty much everyone he comes in contact with. When he meets the doctor, he asks if the child has been born, and the doctor just looks at him and answers, yes, I suppose so, after a fashion. It's not the worst answer you could get, but still, it's not great that the yes is followed by after a fashion. What does that even mean? How after a fashion? Like, either it was born or it wasn't born. And then after asking about his wife and learning that she's okay too, he asks the doctor whether it's a boy or a girl. Which, you know, it's also a very common thing to ask, but the doctor gets really mad. Here now, cried Dr. Keene in a perfect passion of irritation. I'll ask you to go and see for yourself. Outrageous. And was that because the doctor was really mad at gender expectations and gender roles at the time? Not really. I mean, Fitzgerald is not the kind of guy. Mr. Buttons gets very confused and asks if it's triplets. And why would triplets make a doctor so mad? I don't know, but that's where his head goes to. The doctor just finishes that conversation, says that he doesn't want to see Mr. Button or any one of his family ever again, and just drives severely away. So Mr. Button is just left confused and he goes into the hospital worried about what is happening, and the nurses who are in there do not help. I don't suppose he's used to be treated anything other than politely, since they are a prominent family in the city. So when he gets in the hospital and he just says his name and every nurse he talks to just runs away terrified, it's really odd. Then one of the nurses just agrees to help him find his child, and she's not happy about it either. She's also mad at him. And then he finally gets to the nursery to finally see the baby that made everyone so angry. So he asks the nurse which one is his baby, because, you know, you can't really tell babies apart. And his was definitely one you could tell from the others. Because among the other babies, there is a full-grown, bearded 70-year-old man in a crib. And Fitzgerald also describes that his beard moves with the breeze in the room, so yeah. And as he starts talking, he starts complaining because, I mean, it must be very uncomfortable for you as a grown senior citizen to lay in a tiny little crib. I mean, they could not give him a bed. Mr. Button is not convinced that that is his newborn baby, but the nurse is not having any of it. So she basically just kicks them out because that is already been to ruin the reputation of the hospital. So they have to leave, but Mr. Button is very embarrassed to be seen with his old baby. What he does is he goes across the street and he tries to buy clothes for his son. Basically, he sees that there is a giant mannequin in the store and it's wearing baby clothes, and he asks for those. And since he has money, you know, he can buy pretty much whatever he wants. So he gets it and he dresses his son in those ridiculous clothes and just takes him home. Then they shave his beard and dye his hair black and try their best to convince themselves that he's just a normal baby and there's nothing at all weird going on there. And that is the beginning of poor Benjamin Button's life. They try to make him like toys as a normal child would, but he does not. How he learned that, I'm not sure, but he already knows how to read, and he would much rather just read a newspaper and talk to his grandfather while smoking. So we basically have a week-old baby smoking already, but people weren't that aware that smoking was bad for you back then. Actually, people thought that cocaine was great, and there was definitely heroin in child medicines. And also, if you haven't noticed yet, it's, fiction. So I guess it's fine. I mean, smoking's never fine. Don't smoke. By the time he was 12 years old, his parents had grown used to him. It took them 12 years. Can you imagine being that poor old child? They tried so hard to believe that that was a normal situation that they actually convinced themselves, except when some curious anomaly reminded them of the fact. How can you not be reminded of the fact? Well, you're basically torturing a 7-year-old, making him play with toys that he clearly doesn't like. After some time, Benjamin starts realizing that he seems to be growing younger, so that when he's 18, he looks as erect as a man of 50. I'm not going to say that. So that when he's 18, he starts looking more like he's 50. And so his family think it's time to get him into college. And he tries to get into Yale, which was the university that his father had gone to, but that didn't work very well. He looked like he was 50, and he kept insisting to the people at college that he was 18. And obviously they didn't believe him. So they ended up kicking him out of there again. And this is basically the story of a man being kicked out of places since he was born. When he gets to his 20s, he falls in love for the first time with a woman whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce. And surprisingly, she really likes him too, because she says she really likes men his age. They get engaged pretty quickly and get married. As time goes by, he starts growing younger and starts being attracted by activities that younger people usually like. And as that happens, he also starts losing interest in his wife, who is now 35. And he got to the point that when he was nearly 40, his life at home was so boring to him that he decided to join the army. Now, imagine how bad your life has to be at home for you to decide that you actually would rather be in a war. It was kind of fun for him being in the army. He received a medal and everything, and when he came back, his wife obviously was a little older than she was when he left. Because normal people kept aging as he kept getting younger. And Fitzgerald says that the sight of her depressed him. Let's just let that sink in for a while. And as his thirst for gaiety grew, he decided to go to more parties and dance with younger women that he felt attracted to. His wife just went with him every time to just sit in the corner with the older women and just look down on him. She's described as a dowager of evil omen, sat among the chaperons now in haughty disapproval and now following him with sullen, puzzled, and reproachful eyes. In 1910, when he looked 20, he finally managed to enroll in college. And Benjamin Button was not one to just let things go. He apparently had never forgotten that he had sworn vengeance on Yale, so he kept the promise he had made to himself and went to Harvard to just slay in football. Wait, slay? And got to defeat Yale in the feud. He scored 7 touchdowns and 14 field goals for Harvard, and I don't really know what that means because I have no idea how American football works. But still, it was great, apparently. And caused one entire 11 of Yale men to be carried singly from the field unconscious. So, as I said, very manly. And for that, he was the most celebrated man in college, because we celebrate violence. However, he kept growing younger, and in his 3rd year of college, he couldn't even make the team anymore because he was going through reverse puberty, so he was literally growing smaller and thinner. So I guess he just couldn't beat 11 people unconscious anymore. Then, because in this world, people seem to forget who he is all the time, when he was in his senior year, everyone thought he was a prodigy because he was a 16-year-old who was finishing college. Because apparently, the people who had studied with him all this time just forgot that 4 years ago, he was like a major football star who was definitely 20. But the fact that he was growing younger didn't affect just his body. Just as when he was born, he could already read, now as he was getting younger, his brain was not adapted to the amount of knowledge it was meant to hold, and he could no longer perform in college as he used to. Still, he managed to get his degree in Harvard, and he went back to live with his son, Roscoe, since his wife couldn't stand living in the same country as him anymore and had moved to Italy. Now he just acted like a teenager in his son's house, and his son was not happy about it. Benjamin had decided that when he graduated, he wanted to go to prep school, to be around people who were more like him. But his son was not having that. Roscoe was actually very mean to his father. Everyone is pretty much very mean to Benjamin in this book. So even though this is kind of a funny story, it's actually also really sad. So he told Benjamin that when there were visitors in the house, he should only refer to Roscoe as uncle, because it was absurd that a 15-year-old would call him by his first name, even though that 15-year-old was his father. And by the end of that conversation, he was even more of a jerk and just said that, you know what, maybe you should not wait until visitors come. You should just call me uncle all the time so you get used to it. In 1920, Roscoe had his first child, and Benjamin Button was a 10-year-old grandfather. 5 years later, he and his grandson acted and looked around the same age, so they became friends. But when the time came for his grandson to move into the first grade, Benjamin could not accompany him because he was growing even younger. So he just stayed in kindergarten, and he was very happy there. And even when he was happy, it was kind of really sad. Sometimes in other talks talked about what they would do when they grew up. A shadow would cross his little face, as if in a dim, childish way he realized that those were things in which he was never to share. He tried to go back to kindergarten a third year, but then things were too difficult and he was scared because the other boys were bigger than him. They take him home and get him a nurse, and she became the center of his tiny world. As he grows younger and younger, we are reminded that he is very near his death. He can no longer speak and he can understand what people say to him, but he is happy. When the sun went, his eyes were sleepy. There were no dreams to haunt him. And then he remembered nothing. When he was hungry, he cried, that was all. And the last sentence of this book is, then it was all dark, and his white crib and the dim faces that moved above him and the warm, sweet aroma of the milk faded out altogether from his mind. And he died. So thank you guys very much for watching. I really hope you liked it, and I hope to see you in some next video. Bye!